Namaste. How you guys doing? Hope you're well. We got Gaz here. We got Tomaru. Welcome, guys. I hope you guys are having a good day. And whoever else is sitting in the back there. Big love, big blessings. Wow, it's hot here. It's like we are experiencing a heat wave at the end of summer. So it's been crazy on this end of the world. Extremely warm. We had the kind of weather in the last 2 days that we don't usually have in. We don't even usually have that weather in January. And to understand that January is supposed to be the hottest month, right? So we've had heat waves hotter than what you should get in January in March, almost the middle of March, which is crazy. Big love, big blessings to all of you. Hope you guys are smiling, chuckling away. Let me just make sure that Jeremy's got the invite. Pretty sure I sent it to him. Yo, brother. Hope you're good. I'm in the studio, rocking and rolling. Let me know when you're around. Drop him a quick Scotch call. And okay, his internet is not rolling anyway. It is what it is. He will be here. So we've got a cool little conversation today, and I might have to take this top off, man. You know that YouTube penalizes the live if we're not wearing tops. I don't know if you guys know that. Even blokes, it's considered indecent and lewd for a man not to wear a top these days. I mean, we are really living in a woke society, man. How woke do you want it? Like, I better not talk about the fact that I'm not wearing pants here, because even though you can't see it, the fact that I'm doing it, YouTube would probably like penalize me, because apparently it's a rule that YouTubers have to wear pants or something. I don't know what's going on in the world, man. But I've noticed that whenever I've got people on in the channel not wearing tops, they penalize the live, which is like, I'd understand if I had like a girl here not wearing a top, but like, yeah, man. Zerilat, how you doing, man? Zerilat, are you good, man? Yeah. So basically, it's a topic that I think is really important for us to discuss and consider and get some kind of a traction on. Is the idea of suffering and the human vehicle of not being, we all have this fixation with pain and suffering, human beings. And namaste, Otigali. How you doing? I hope you're good. That's fair, since women have to wear skirts. Women don't have to wear skirts. Have you heard of hot pants? It's basically funky pairs of undies, and girls are fine if they're wearing hot pants. Do you know what I mean? It's like wearing underpants, which is like probably going to affect a man more than a man not wearing a top's going to affect a woman. If you see what I'm getting at, like men have a different constitution when it comes to being able to defend themselves against women. Like a man needs to defend himself against a woman wearing hot pants. You know how it is. So I hope you're all well. Namaste. I hope you're good. I hope you're smiling. Yeah. So the idea of suffering, and the alchemy of suffering. I think in order to really look at suffering, we got to look at pain as well. I just want to be sure I sent the right link. I hope I didn't send the wrong link to someone. Hope I didn't send the wrong link. Okay, so Jeremy hasn't been getting his. I wonder if he's having problems with his internet. So the idea of pain and I want to stress this, I can't stress this enough. We don't realize how much pain is an idea. Even though we're living in physical bodies and pain is physical information being sent from the nerve to the brain, the experience of pain is a very subjective one. And pain is tempered by fear. And, this fear, which sort of revolves around pain, is, exactly, Otigili. It's harder for a man to control himself around a naked woman than it is for a woman to control herself around a naked man. I think women have more self-control fundamentally. I think it's an accurate statement. Men are more going to act out their impulse. Women are more going to think about the impulse before they act it out. Women tend to be a little more cerebral than men, really, if you get right down to it. They're more internalized. I mean, their body parts are internalizing, aren't they? And I think this is a very important point, this conversation that we're having. It relates to pain because women have a higher physical pain threshold. And I think they have a higher pain threshold because they're able to internalize the experience better than men can often. When you internalize the experience of pain, it's not the same. This is something that I learned. And, I've often been told that I've got extremely high pain threshold, by doctors and nurses and surgeons or whatever, whenever I've been injured. And they've been like, wow, like, how are you not in pain? And I'd be like, no, I can feel it, but it's abstract. Much of the pain is in our minds. So if you can take your mind to a point where you're not thinking about how you feel about the pain, and you just experience it as raw data from nerves about an uncomfortable sensation. And that's really what pain is. Pain is a very, very uncomfortable sensation. That's all it is. It's a highly uncomfortable situation of stimuli that's basically alerting one to an issue. And we turn that into a mental, oh my gosh, pain. And how many times, think about this for a moment, right? How many times have you yourself or someone you know or a child been injured, right? And you think to yourself, oh, it's nothing. Or they don't think it's much. And you say, look at that. And they look and they see a big gash. And now suddenly the pain hits them. You guys have all witnessed that, I'm sure. Either yourself or children, or your children do it quite instinctively. Like, so this is in itself like a little bit of a proof of what I'm really getting at here, is that if you injure yourself and you don't know how serious the injury is, then you won't know how to grade the pain in your mind. And so you will experience it as a very uncomfortable sensation. The moment you know how serious it is, it becomes excruciatingly painful. And it's sort of the idea of, it's what I like to call and I'm coining the phrase now, so everybody sit tight. Here comes some bush whisperer phrase coining. I call it a personally derived diagnosis. Diagnosis, but a personally derived diagnosis. When the knowledge that we gain through our own experience is of a dire type, then we have this personally gained diagnosis. And it's like diagnosis, right? It's the same as when you go to a doctor and the doctor says to you, oh my gosh, you've got 3 months to live. And suddenly you're like, I'm in pain, I'm suffering. Before you went to the doctor, you were fine. Oh, there's this little bit of an uncomfortable sensation. It's bugging me a little bit. You go to the doctor is, no, that's life-threatening. And suddenly, oh my God, this is the worst. Yeah, exactly, Tiger Lily. I think what we experience as pain is highly psychosomatic. extremely psychosomatic. So you experience the uncomfortable sensations from your nerves telling you that something's wrong, and then your brain puts that into perspective. And once your brain puts that into perspective, you then turn that into fear. And once the fear is mingled with the uncomfortable sensation, and the fear becomes an imprint, and the imprint of the fear becomes a diagnosis, right? The dire knowledge of what the fear could represent in terms of what this pain means. And that's when we start to experience the real pain. Now, I think that there are certain times when that is not quite completely necessarily always the case. Like, for example, I've never been one to suffer from migraines, but I've known people who suffer from migraines. However, here's the thing about a migraine, right? Most migraines, as you know, start in the stomach. And so there's a change of acidity, a change of a biochemical shift within the gut. And that biochemical shift within the gut changes the way the blood circulates. And that often creates a backlog of blood in the brain, which causes the migraine. Now, because I haven't had migraines a lot, like the only time I've had it is like if I've had a reason to have it, like if I had an illness. And what I noticed, or if there's been something that's happened, like I've eaten something I shouldn't, now I've got a sore head. I've always noticed that there's a sort of dizziness of my mind if there's that kind of pain. I think that the mental ability, cognition, is affected before the migraine, and that the actual pain of the migraine follows a deterioration of cognitive and cognizant potential, which is the gut. And I think that when the stomach biochemical harmony has been disrupted and there's not a state of balance within the gut system, that is when we start to recognize and realize, I just want to see what's going on here. Okay. Okay. Yo, brother, are you about? Because he messaged me to say he was there. Then I messaged him like 6 minutes later. And then he wasn't there. So I'm not sure what's happening with Jeremy. Anyway, he shall be there, I'm sure, when he gets here. Just want to make sure that there's not a problem, that I've sent him the wrong link or something. I'm pretty sure I sent him the right one. So this idea that the biochemical disturbance in the stomach and the gut produces this sort of mental staggering. And the mental staggering means that the brain then doesn't know how to compute the experience of the uncomfortableness. And so there are alarm bells going off in the mind. And those mental alarm bells, I think, exasperate the pain of the backlog in the brain, you know, because yes, there would be a certain amount of you know, disrupting. So if the biome is disturbed in our bodies, I think it creates quite a significant reaction to our mental state. And this is something people don't really recognize and realize readily. So before we jump into the suffering story to look at what pain represents, I think pain is largely a mental experience. It's a little bit of uncomfortableness that is turned into a big thing based upon fear and worry and panic and stress. And the panic and the stress is relayed into the physical body, which is then translated into an experience that we relate to that particular occurrence, that particular nerve, that particular point in the body. And so we become hypersensitive, and the hypersensitivity to that nervous information causes what we experience as pain. However, that hypersensitivity that we're experiencing is due to a mental process, what's going on in the mind, which is relating to the brain. And so then that brings us back to suffering now, I think, to look and to consider like suffering as it relates. Now, I'm having a fun time here. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it as it is, man. Just say it as it is. Don't say it like anything that it isn't. Just say it like it is. So, what happened, Chaos? Lost tip of a finger. When did this happen, Gaz? This happened a long time ago, yeah? Sounds like a it must have been a long time ago. So sorry, I just need to go and fetch my son's tablet because I'm going to throw it against the wall if he opens that door. I hope he heard that. So he's misbehaving and he's being naughty. I'm going to give him one chance to do his schoolwork, his class, and if he doesn't go and do his schoolwork, I'm going to go and get the tablet. And I'm going to fetch a tablet right now. If you guys hear a smashing sound against the wall, that used to be my son's tablet.
Please don't help me. Please don't go. I really not.
I'm going to lock the door. I'm going to get your tablet if you disturb me again. That sound against the wall. Don't ask your mom to give you assignments. I'm not actually joking, by the way. I literally will throw this thing against the wall. Because he's been very naughty with his mom today. He was having a shouting match with his mom, and I said to him, Daddy's not putting up with brat tantrums. So he's on his last legs, and I said to him, I'm going to ban him from playing tablet for like a year. And the easiest way to ban him from playing tablet for a year is to just make sure there's no tablet. There's no more games. There's no more Minecraft. That'll sort his attitude out for sure. I'll tell you that one. It will really sort his attitude out. But children do need a certain amount of discipline. And what I heard between him and his mom this morning was just ridiculous. Just bad news. Like, I shouldn't be listening to that. So yeah, I think, you know, much of the pain, like you're saying, Gaz, you had been in a car accident, so there's a lot of shock as well. You know, hey Vince, namaste Vince, how you doing? Is that a new picture? Vince has got a new picture. Namaste every day. I hope you're good. Hope everybody is smiling and shining and thriving and not driving. But if you're driving easily. Namaste the star, how you doing? Hope you're good. Hope everybody is happy. I'm wondering whether I should actually open another tab where it's easier to actually read. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open another tab where I can actually read, the comments better, because StreamYard has become like a real pain in the bottom end for me. So yeah, you know, that's much better. That is so much better. I can't tell you how much better that is. Well, actually I can. It's much, much, much better. Yeah, you know, I do think that we are literally in this sort of dynamic now where we are becoming very cerebral creatures, especially because of the internet and because of information. We're living in the age of information, are we not? Which means we're living more in our minds than anywhere else. And living in our minds means that we're also, you know, very heavily affected by thoughts. And I think like in the old days, maybe humans had higher thresholds of pain because we lived more naturally and in tune with nature. And when we were more naturally in tune with nature, we didn't have the same sort of psychological dilemmas working themselves out for us. So we were able to just sort of do what we needed to do. Like me, for example, touch wood, I haven't used painkillers The only time I ever used a kind of a painkiller was when I was like a child. That's because it was given to me. I've never used painkillers in my life. I once tried them when I was like young. I just didn't like them. So I've never used painkillers. And I've been in pain. I've had pain, been in a lot of pain. I think if you just harden your mind to the experience of pain, the psychological trauma of pain dissolves, and then pain becomes much more manageable and bearable. But we have become so enamored by comfort in this modern age that we are constantly seeking comfort, and anything that disturbs that comfort we don't like most beds, for example. Most people's beds are too soft for me. I sleep on a futon. It's pretty hard. It's a wooden series of planks and a hard Japanese style mattress, and it's softer than being on the hard floor, but not that much softer. And my boy used to sleep in his mother's bed. I gave her my bed, which is like those, memory foam. It's like a big fat mattress, like fat like that. No, it's a fat mattress. It's a mattress like, the mattress must be about 16 inches thick or something. And it's got different layers, springs and this and that, and memory foam over the top, and you sag right into that mattress. And I could never stand sleeping on that bed, even though I bought it for my ex, my son's mother, because she wanted that, so I got that for her, and I bought that bed when she was pregnant, so that she had like extra memory foam and all the comforts that she could desire when she was a pregnant lady. And it's a king size bed and everything. My son used to sleep in that bed with his mom, and then he didn't. And sometimes he came to jump on my futon with me, and he was like, "Oh wow, this is so cool. This is hard." Once he slept on a hard bed, he didn't want to go. He refuses to sleep in his mom's bed anymore because it's too soft now. And I think that's really interesting. I think that speaks about our sort of our current sort of epoch, where we're at, in the civilization, that we are addicted to comfort, and our addiction to comfort causes back problems. For example, just as an example, like the beds you sleep on, right? If you sleep on beds with a very soft, so I'm just going to see if that was Jeremy, if something's come up. No, nothing's come up. Okay, good. I think we're addicted to this comfort age of technology producing comfort, of overly comfortable couches that turn into beds that are overly soft, food that's too comfortable to eat, too easy to eat, right? And cars extremely comfortable. In the old days, you had to walk. If you didn't walk, you would sit on a wooden plank with a cushion, like being drawn by horses or something, or you would sit on the back of a horse, right? Yeah, we become totally spoiled, Tiger Lily, And I think that's not healthy. I don't believe it's good for our psyches. I don't believe it's good for us in any way at all. For me, it seems like, just from a perspective of I wish I could make this thing go away. It's so annoying. I've got this important: when streaming to a profile, viewer comments won't be able to show unless the stream is public. And this stream is public on Facebook, right? It's completely public on Facebook. But now they take up my whole area here with this notification that is irrelevant, because it's this whole box is taken up. So I'm going to actually write to streamer and ask why this keeps showing up. This is actually error. But I think there's a be understood and recognized and realized as well. When we start to notice just how much of of what we experience is in our minds. And when we start taking responsibility for that, I think that's like a really important point to get to, because we are generally sort of mollycoddled in our lives. And the mollycoddling is to the point where we lose perspective. We completely lose perspective. We completely lose our natural flow, and we become sort of obsessed with ourselves. We become obsessed with our comfort, and I think like it's really a toxic environment to be in. Personally, I think, and this is where we live. This is how we live. And it's important for us to be able to get a grip, So suffering. What is suffering? Let's actually dive into the topic here. I've been beating around the bush for long enough. Sorry about the bush beating, people. I just like to really investigate pain, because I think that people don't recognize and realize how much of physical pain is completely a mental experience. And it's only when we start to really take stock of that and start to fully appreciate it, totally appreciate it, that it becomes easier for us to sort of relate to. And so in this sense, I would say, and yes, walking everywhere is good. Oh, Tiger Lily, this is something that we've forgotten. And Gaz, this entire reality was designed for pain and suffering. And it's what we find. I think you're right in a sense. I think there's a lot of suffering that is the baseline of human existence. But here's where it gets interesting. What is suffering? Why do we suffer? Now, when I think of the word suffering, I'm thinking of an idea of a flame that's being put out. How does that sit with you guys? It's not that I've gathered that specifically from etymology. That for me is like, how do I explain this? When I see a word, I can feel the word. Every sound that a mouth makes, I can feel it. And in my mind, I get impressions of what a word means, or how a word affects me. And when the word suffering comes, I feel it like a blanket that tries to smother your flame, tries to smother your light, tries to smother the warmth out of you, right? To make you cold and dry, where the warmth and the moisture inside represents the element of fire. And so when I think of suffering, I think of that blanket of experience that blocks the natural flow. And the natural flow, I think, is to be in a state of vulnerability and to be able to, snuff you out. I suppose that's pretty much what I'm saying, Interesting, the word snuff. They put the N in there, so it turns it into a final transformative. So when you add N, you're adding the death card of Scorpio into the mix, right? And so that makes it a final transformation. So you take that N out, and suff, it's the process of snuffing out. That makes sense. So suff is more of a process. Snuff is what the process does, the transformation caused by the process. Interesting way of looking at words. But so I get this feeling, this is onomatopoeic feeling that runs through my body of the word suffering. And I think that we've become enamored to who we think we are. And when we are not being who we are, hold on, now this is important. I'm sitting here with a large screen, and I got to check and see if Jeremy has arrived. Just got to take a look and see. Okay, so Jeremy's, something must have happened. Something must have happened. It's all good. All good. I'll just ask him. All good. Your end. I hope he's not dealing with an emergency. Shame. Like his little girl woke up and she's not feeling well or something, or could be a million things. He's a dad, so it could be related to his little daughter. But or maybe he sat up and he fell asleep again because it's 6 a.m. on his end, which wouldn't be unrealistic, unrealistic thing to do. But I think that it is quite important for us to recognize and to take stock and to realize that the idea behind sort of coming to terms with the ideas of being able to sort of transcend the challenges in life are really what we're talking about here. And it's difficult, I think, because we're in a world that's financially and economically driven. And it's driven economically to sort of push us towards success. And this constant pushing us towards success means that there's an element of competition involved, right? And this competition is driving us towards making it or breaking it, right? Winning or losing. And we've been programmed as children that we need to succeed and win. Otherwise, we don't get the esteem that we desire. And so when we go into the world, we tend to want to hide our vulnerabilities because we see our vulnerabilities as weak spots that can be exploited by other people in this dog-eat-dog world, right? And it's very sad, but it is, it is the reality that we're living in. It's what we're facing. And so our vulnerabilities, we mask them. We hide what we think are our weaker parts, the parts of us that we don't think are attractive. We change the way we express it, and we start to become something that we're not, right? Yeah, basically, Gaz, everything's a bit of a lie. So we tend to lie. And we lie about who we are in the way that we behave, in the way that we express who we are. And so because we're in this constant state of disconnection from ourselves, the joy of life that we should be experiencing, the natural joy that is the birthright of a child, and the way a child is just able to enjoy, right? Put a child down and the child will enjoy themselves. Why? Because what else are they going to do, right? They'll play. Put them in a pit of sand, the pit of sand will become like a playground for them, and they'll play in the sand, whatever you want to give them, that they'll play with it. Little animals are like this. Birds are like this. Where's the Gotham? The Gotham cruising around on the floor somewhere. He's like that. The Gotham? Where's the Gotham? There he is. Come. Where's the Gotham? There. Are you finished playing on the floor? See? So this little guy has been running around playing everywhere, running around on the floor, having fun, and that's all he knows how to do. That's how he rolls. That's his thing, right? In fairness, and why shouldn't it be? Why should it be anything less than fun? If we're going to be honest about it, right? It only seems fair that it should be fun. So I think like we're living in this sort of society where it's a given that can't post comments to some destinations. Really? That's interesting. I can't post comments to some destinations. So there seems to be some issue with StreamYard after all. That would explain why it keeps giving me these annoying little consistently annoying alerts that cover up my chat. It just doesn't stop, man. It's like crazy ex-girlfriend that won't leave you alone, well done, StreamYard. You have become like a real pain in the butt. But I do think that there is a remedy for this, a remedy for this constant need to hide our vulnerabilities, to hide our parts of ourselves we don't think are beautiful, and to bring ourselves into a state of added harmony. And it's just about being who we are. I've been waiting for that for a while. And I think that this is the thing, right? We don't get rewarded for being who we are in the world, right? Generally speaking, people get rewarded for not being who they are. We get rewarded for winning. That's the truth of it. And I think that is part of the societal death trap that we're living in. And so the moment we are not desiring to win, I think we are halfway there. So desiring to win is the desire to be more than we are, to get rewards, to reap the comforts that will protect us from pain and suffering. And the moment we're okay about not winning, we don't care about winning, then we start to move our perspective to what I think is more important, the quality of life. And when we start to sort of focus on the quality of life, that's when we start to get a much more holistic and wholesome perspective of what it is we're doing here and why we're here and what is this life for? What is the purpose of my life? What do I want to leave behind when I leave this world? And the moment here's another point. I think the fear of not being alive is related to this as well. So the fear of not being alive, people that are very goal-oriented and very focused towards success, on an unconscious level, they think they will live forever. How's that for an interesting concept? Yeah, they don't gravitate to the idea and recognize that this is the temporary reality, and that at some point we will be gone, and whatever we've achieved will amount to nothing. And once you've got too much skin in the game, once you've been geared towards success and achieving and winning, then you don't want to know that you did it all for nothing, right? On an unconscious level. So it causes you to not think about that reality of, oh yeah, you'll leave this world and none of this will matter. What do you mean? My hundreds of millions of dollars that I've managed to earn, I won't be able to take it with me? No, you will go here with nothing the way you arrived. Well, then what did I work so hard for? Why did I work so hard to get all those hundreds of millions of dollars if I can't take it with me? That's a good question. You mean I could have spent more time lying on the beach? Yes. Walking in the woods? Yes. Playing with my kids? Yes. And that's where the reality becomes divergent, I think. And so that ability to recognize the limits of temporal reality and just how finite and short this life is, it gives us the recognition that running after goals and success, financial and societal, and getting the accolades, whatever it is we desire, means very, very little in the bigger picture, in the greater scheme of things. And we start to realize that actually how we feel matters more. And that's where the suffering element comes into it. If you are running away from reality, running away from the idea that you're not going to live forever, in denial of the fact that you're mortal, not recognizing that life is short and that you've got to make choices and live with the choices and then not live with the choices after that, then you get stuck in a cycle of trying to generate more success, more money, more accolade, more comfort. And in that process, you're running away from uncomfortableness, pain, and suffering. And because when you think about it, the moment you start to consider the fact that you're a mortal being, you start to suffer. What do you guys think about that? That is the beginning of suffering. I'll give you an example. I'm in my second half of my century, right? And now I have to recognize that my little boy is 9. Where will I be 30 years from now? Will I be alive? And then how will my little boy feel when I'm not alive? That these are the thoughts that move through my unconscious. Will I be there for him when he needs me? When he's going through a challenging phase in his life, like everybody goes through some challenging phase in his life, will I be there for him? Will I be able to be there for him? Or will I not be in this world? My dogs, I love my dogs. Hey, Indigo, Daddy loves his dogs. She said that is the girl of Whirler. Hey, it's a big girl. Hi. She's giving me that beautiful indigo look. She's such a sweetheart. Is she going to come and make a guest appearance? Hey? Oh, yeah, she comes. She's so beautiful. They are now 10 years old. So now I have to recognize and live with the fact that yes, Daddy's got a bottle here, doesn't he? Hey, Indigo? No, don't come under the table. Don't come this way. You're going to mess up all Daddy's cables. Yes, my sweetheart. Yes, Daddy's good. I got to live with the recognition that, my dogs have got a shelf life. And this for me is quite painful, right? Because, like I held them when they were puppies. So to start thinking about mortality is to start realizing, like, I got a girlfriend, like what's going to happen? Which one of us is going to pass away first? My son, how is his life going to be? Am I going to watch him suffer? Is he going to be happy? Is his life going to be smooth? What's the world going to be like when my boy is a bit older? Yeah. So all of these ideas are related to mortality. And the moment we start to contemplate and consider our own mortality, that's when we start to feel a certain degree of sorrow and a recognition and a realization that this ride does end. And we've got to leave behind the loved ones, the people we meet along the way, our children, our friends, our loved ones, our partners, my mother. I've got to think about my mom. How long do I have with my mom? How long does my little boy have with my mom? Right? And namaste, Tree Dylan, how are you doing? Long time. I hope, are you still, where are you now? You're not in London anymore, are you? You're out somewhere in the UK. Big love. Rob, namaste, dear Rob. I hope you're good. Hope you're well. So yeah, these are the things that I personally struggle or struggle against. The recognition that, my mom won't be alive. But when I think about my own mortality, it makes me think about my dad and the good times I had with my dad and that I missed my dad. I think about my younger brother. He crossed over when he was very young. Then I start thinking about my dogs. I start thinking about, friends, everybody close to me. And that still sort of starts triggering a sense of bittersweet. It's a kind of a sorrow in a way. And that is like the basis of suffering. So suffering and mortality, I think, are so closely. Oh, you're in Turkey. That's right. You did tell me you're out there in that's cool. That's cool. Turkey rocks. Anatolia. Are you in Anatolia? Woohoo! Ancient Greece. Dun, 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 dun. Before Greece was Greece. Before they used to rub it on the wheel. Yeah. Before Greece was something you rubbed on the wheel. So that's my perspective on, suffering relating to the end of life, the recognition that we're on a journey towards the end of life, and the recognition that as we get older, life will get less comfortable, right? Because our bodies will be less able to enjoy. So there's that unconscious shame, man. Rob, I feel for your cousin's kid, man. I wouldn't want to be in Israel right now with everything that's going on, you know. I feel for the Israeli people, you know. The Zionist government's not doing them any justice. And this is something people don't realize, you know. A lot of people in Israel are against the Zionist government. The last march was 10% of the Israeli population took to the streets against the Zionist government. That's a big stat, man. It's huge. For 10% of the population to protest against their government, do you know what that means? It means that at least half the population is against the government. Probably more, probably like 60, 70%. They probably rig all the elections. It's the only reason they're in power. Because, you know, in the UK, it's a big deal when 2%, 1.5% of the population's on the streets to protest against the government. It's a big deal. So when it's 10%, it's like it's unprecedented. That would be the equivalent of the USA having 30 million people protesting on the streets. Could you imagine that in the States? 30 million people protesting. That would mean that every big city in the USA would have like million, you know, more than a million or like close to a million people on the streets. It's like there would be no cars driving anywhere. The whole country would shut down. That's what we're talking about in Israel when they had those big protests. And so, you know, the Israeli government is heavy. They don't deal with protesters lightly. Those protesters are putting themselves in the firing range. Literally, they put themselves in danger. More danger than in Europe, for example. And it's pretty dangerous wherever you go. Yeah, I can imagine that, you know. So when I lived in Israel, I remember that being a thing. I thought it was just the hippies, dude. I thought it was just all the hippie communities that I knew that were like that, the young people. But that was like decades ago, you know, in fairness. But getting back to the point of suffering, mortality, and how suffering and mortality are connected, and how suffering itself is an idea, and it's an idea that springs from the thought of mortality, and from that point out, it wants to propagate the sense of comfort, because that sense of comfort gives us a false sense of security. Because the idea of leaving the world is a very uncomfortable idea. Let's face it. It involves facing our fears, facing our sorrows, facing our insufficiencies, facing our conscience, you know, having to accept loss. And as much as we all like to think we're ready for it, when it comes to the push, it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone, you know, especially like if your loved one passes away, or your parent, or your child, or your, you know, your animal. Yeah, whether it's a friend, lover, mother, child, it can be somebody that means a lot to you. And so when we contemplate this, we start to get an insight into the nature of suffering. Suffering is a blanket that is put over life and prevents life from expressing itself. So what is life then? Life must be joy, right? Life must be that experience of taking a breath and feeling that feeling that run through the body, that life feeling, that joyful feeling, which what life is. In fact, you know, the breath and the heart, peace is the heart, and joy is the lung, right? So prana is the breath of life that flows through us, and the breath of life that literally flows through us is the experience and expression of joy. And I wonder what happened to Jeremy. Have I had a message from him? He must have fallen asleep. Hold on. Did I get this wrong? Did I get this wrong? Am I the one who's wrong? He was here an hour. Have the clocks changed in the USA again? Where are we? Oh my gosh, don't tell me the clocks changed. I need to check this out. Did the clocks change in USA in March? Did the clocks change? Am I mixing up? Oh no. Damn. So that's why Jeremy's not here. Okay. I didn't realize the clocks were changing. I thought the clocks would change after this week. Because in the UK it changes a week later. So I figured that your clocks will be going until mid-March. I didn't realize the clocks had changed. So he was there an hour earlier thinking, where the hell am I? Our clocks don't change, so our time is universal here. So that explains why Jeremy's not here, because Jeremy woke up earlier and his clocks moved. Oh, damn! I wish I had checked that out and actually looked at it, but I didn't know the clocks had changed, and he probably just assumed that the clocks change where I am, which they don't. Clocks never change in Cape Town, man. Our clocks are as solid as clockwork. Okay, so that is what's going on. So I don't have to worry about the guy. He's all right. He probably just had to go and do things. So yeah, I think that, you know, the idea of suffering being related to the knowledge of transience of life, and that we will pass over, and that we have to learn to let go of the mortal coil, as it were, and all associated with the mortal coil, which is all that we've amassed: the finances, the people, the joy, the children, the animals, and that is the definition, I think, of suffering. And then we apply that definition to other aspects of our life. We look at ourselves and we go, well, okay, what about those little micro transformations? That's a big transformation that's transforming out of this physical body into a different state of consciousness and being elsewhere, and everything here is lost. So what about when we go through little micro transformations? So then we apply that same mental idea of this fear of transformation, which is really what we're talking about when we talk about the fear of passing over, and the sorrow that is related to that, to the idea of the loss of youth, right? The loss of youth, which is one form of suffering. The loss of money, another form of suffering. The loss of a friend, right? Having a fallout with a friend, or a breakup, you know, between lovers, another great form of suffering that we enjoy in the world. And so that particular relationship is no longer alive. And so it's lost. And so any form of loss then becomes a definition of suffering. And why do we have this fixation with having and holding? Yeah, that's like, I think, where it gets down to the crux of it. And so we can look at like ideas from Buddhism, or ideas from different sort of spiritual traditions, religious fundamental groups, and look at them and be able to sort of relate that there's, you know, these fundamental ideas have been contemplated by many people for like generations. And it's completely normal and natural, if you think about it, right? For people to worry, for people to be afraid, yeah. And I do think that as we sort of become more conscious and more aware and more awake, we do start to recognize that we need to start preparing ourselves for not being alive. And this is a big part of yoga, right? And Tantra, is the preparation for the consciousness and the preparation for the body for the event of leaving the physical form behind, and coming to terms with the emotional struggles, the mental struggles, the physical struggles that we will face at that moment of leaving the mortal coil, and how we can sort of prepare ourselves better for the transitions that we will have to go through in order to reach that sort of perfect level of harmony. And that harmony that we will require in order to be able to transcend our physical addictions. And I think here's another point. I think the word addiction is quite relevant. We're addicted. We're addicted to the people that we know. We're addicted to the people that we love. It's an interesting way of looking at it. We're addicted to the animals. We're addicted to the circumstances that we have in our lives. We're addicted to the resources and the physical objects that we have. And we get addicted to the foods that we enjoy. We get addicted to the substances that we enjoy, right? If that could be wine, that could be, psychological addiction to joyful herbs. It could be particular food, cuisine, cooking. And we become addicted to these patterns. And so the idea of patterning and addiction, I think, are quite closely aligned. You're always on time, Tomru. Yes, exactly. Every day 9. This attachment that we have sort of is fundamental. I think without the attachment, we wouldn't be able to experience joy. And that's quite interesting if you think about it, right? The importance of joy, the importance of 8 a.m. and it's 8 a.m. and you're about to have a bowl. Oh, Rob, you cheeky man, you. Well, enjoy it. So I think that this is like a key point for us to recognize and a key point for us to realize and to take stock of, that we are moving through life and that everything around us becomes an addiction. And so this is why abstinence is important. This is why fasting and, abstinence from any particular act, be it sex, be it food, be it, whatever it is that you like, is a healthy thing to do once in a while. In the same way that if you ever hurt yourself, don't use pain pills. Allow yourself to experience the pain, because in that making yourself naked and allowing yourself to actually experience the pain a little bit, it gives you sort of a sense and an opportunity to be able to face that part of the self, because there's this massive, profoundly large part of the self. Vince, of course you are. You're in Hawaii. What else are you going to do, dude? Do you surf? By the way, Vince, do you surf? There's a question for Vincent. Do you surf, dude? I mean, I've heard about the waves in Hawaii. I've seen some pretty good tubes. It's a nice place to ride tubes, isn't it? Oh gosh, we've got a place to ride tubes not so far from here. It's called Dangers. It's the only tube in Cape Town. And I used to ride tubes when I was young. And I was talking to my girlfriend about it just yesterday, reminiscing of what it feels like to be inside the water, and the water's curled around you and you're in the wave. And the sound, the acoustics, and the sucking sensation, and the way that all the sound just bounces off the moving water is quite a head trip. But so yeah, if you're in Hawaii, you should be smoking and you should be surfing, I'm guessing. But I do think that surfing is probably quite a good metaphor for what we're talking about. It's like when you catch that perfect wave, right? The wave has to end. You could be inside riding a wave and you could be inside that perfect tube, but that tube, it's going to end. And very often when it ends, unless you're careful, you're going to get closed out, right? In Hawaii, in like Dangers, you don't want to be on the reef. It's a sharp reef. And the water sucks up, like there's that much water between you and the reef at the bottom of the wave. So you don't want to wipe out, because your wetsuit gets shredded. You end up getting cut. You end up getting hurt. Your board gets dinged. That's a real pain in the butt if you're surfing. Now you got to take your surfboard out of the water. You can't surf anymore, right? Because you got a ding on your board. If you surf with a ding on your board, your board gets waterlogged. The moment you got a ding, you got to get out of the water. That's it. Your surfing day is done. Then you got to go and fix your ding. You got to go and get some glass fiber. You got to get your resin. You got to paint it on, and you got to seal up your ding after letting your board dry for like about 4 or 5 days. So the rest of your week's off. You're not surfing again for the rest of the week. That's what it means to get a ding on your board. So, and I think like life is really very much like that too. You get the joy of surfing, and it doesn't last very long. You get that wave, and you're only on that wave for a short period of time. But the whole day was about that wave. 1 or 2 waves. So you go through a whole big mission to go surfing. You spend like getting there, getting yourself rigged, getting yourself out at the break, waiting, finding the perfect lip, the perfect place to wait. You'll be catching some waves here or there, but really you're sitting at the back, you're waiting for those few good waves. And if you the whole day get like 3 good waves, that's a good day. Yeah, like special waves. Like if you're in dangers and you're riding tubes and you can get into a tube once or twice or 3 times in a day, that makes your day. So, like jumping a dirt bike. I'm sure, Rob, that must be the same thing for people that live in places where there's not that waves, but like where the earth is your wave and the dirt bike is your board. I can see that. I had some fun with dirt bikes in the jungle too. You like body surfing, Vince? Nice. Yeah, body surfing's fun. Body surfing's fun too, man. You can actually have a ball on body surfing. In a way, it's actually easier to avoid getting trapped in the washing machine if you're body surfing, ironically. But yeah, in life, I think we become sort of scared of facing the end. And so we run away from the end. And the further we run from the end, the more we try to escape the fatality of life's end, the more obsessed we become with comfort, the worse we become as people, i.e., we're not our truer selves. We become more afraid of revealing the parts of us that we think aren't beautiful, or our vulnerabilities. And in this process, we get lost. We lose ourselves. We leave ourselves behind. And the moment we leave ourselves behind, life becomes an endless source of suffering. Because now every choice that we make is either taking us closer to our suffering or further from our suffering. Because now we've got this suffering debt that needs to be paid because we've been running away from it. And the moment we move back towards it, we start to suffer again. But the suffering then releases the pressure that's built up, the stress. And it brings us back to that joyful, natural state of being, which is the inner child. And the more we are in denial of this necessity of being in tune with the inner child and being vulnerable, and the further we try to run away or escape, or more we try to run away from the process of suffering, the worse becomes that inner child potential, because we are then no longer able to recognize. We're no longer able to recognize just exactly who it is that we are. And so we end up going through life trying to be something that we're not. And this is something that I realized as a child, I realized that after I drowned in a swimming pool and I crossed over and I came back, and I was like, all these adults are so bound by fear. They're so bound by trying to hide their true face that they create this facade for themselves that they then become trapped within, like a prison. And so we imprison ourselves within the facades that we produce as a result of trying to hide our vulnerabilities and parts of ourselves that we think aren't beautiful from other people, because we're afraid of being alone. That's really what it comes down to. And we're afraid of being alone because that represents crossing over, right? Can we see how this all fits together? So the point of crossing over, that's just you. You're on your own. You're facing the end. You're facing the truth. And when you're alone and on your own, facing into the spiritual energies and consciousness, even though it might not seem like it directly, it's the same thing. So we can become even more obsessed, even more imprisoned with the idea behind, this notion of who we're meant to be. And that, I think, is the crux of what holds us attached to suffering and what turns this wheel of suffering in the way that it does, So where's the tarot card? There are a number of cards that I think that are relevant, and I'll flash them up one by one. We'll get a sort of a bit of a look. Wheel of Fortune tarot. Can you believe it? When I put Wheel of Fortune Trump in there, it shows me of all things, it shows me casinos. You gotta giggle, man. You can't make this stuff up. Like, yeah, that's obviously what I'm talking about. I'm looking for a casino, that's Wheel of Fortune Trump. So let's get this up on the screen here. So I think like this is one of the sort of points that we can sort of look at here. And if we look at this Trump, yeah, we can see there's quite a lot going on here. So these are the sort of things that can get us stuck. The moment we get stuck, we get left behind. We need to be moving with the wheel. The wheel is turning. And if we're moving with the wheel, then we don't get stuck on one of these elements. And you see we've got the element of earth there. We've got the element of fire. We've got the element of water and the element of air. And we can see this turning. There's the positive, the comfort, the good. There's the evil, the bad, the uncomfortable, the painful. And we can see there's the serpent that's following the flow, which means that this entire expression is an expression of energy that's in movement. And that movement of energy is an expression of fundamental state, right? A fundamental primordial sense of being represented by the blue sky in the background. And this wheel that's turning. Notice the wheel that's turning has got 8 spokes coming out of it, right? Why do I say 8 spokes? Well, there's an arrow pointing one way and another arrow pointing another way, in a sense, if you want to get right down to it. And then you've got the cross, which is the X cross of Saturn. So we're talking about polarity of being, right? That vertical ascension and moving from the left and the right, which represents the different directions you can go, right? Right here, I can move to my left. I can turn in the left circle, or I can turn in a right circle, or I can start turning to look down, or I can start turning to look up. So there's effectively 2 rotational axes that we have available to us. And those 2 rotational axes represent our outward sort of direction. And obviously this represents expansion, right? This card represents expansion. Oh my gosh. Next time, please. I didn't even put the wheel on the wall. I didn't put the wheel on. Oh, Shinobi, you're there. I thought you were busy on Fridays, brother. I hope you're good. I hope you are thriving. I hope you are happy. Jeremy just sent me a message. I'll chat to him just now. But I just realized what I'd done. I didn't actually have the card up on the screen. I've got to stop doing this, man. I've got to stop doing this. It's not the best thing, Shinobi. So I'll send Shinobi an invitation. Maybe he's up for it. But so we can see in the Wheel of Fortune that it represents all of these potentials that I was talking about. The 8 spokes in the wheel you can see there, and the 2 rotational axes, and then the X, which is representing Saturn, time, which is what this card is heavily bound by. It's the principle of expansion that moves outwards, but it is bound by the contraction of time of Saturn as a polarity, a polarizing force. And so we get a clear idea that this is representing the comfort and the good luck in life, right? And the good luck and the comfort that we experience in life being represented by this card is rather sort of quite telling. Then we can go to temperance, and that'll give us like another sort of idea of what we're dealing with here. So when we look at temperance now, right, temperance is also a card that relates to Jupiter, but it specifically relates to Sagittarius, if we're going to be specific, right? And as relating to Sagittarius, we can see here that this is basically representing in its most basic form that which builds potential polarity and power. And the tempering is what the comfort and the suffering tempers us to make us more potent, to make us more effective in life. However, we want to put that into perspective. And so it's important to realize that in this particular situation, we've got temperance, which is one element of Jupiter. Then we've got another element of Jupiter, which we can also consider, because we're looking at the expansiveness here, right? So let's look at Pisces, right? Let's look at Pisces. Why not look at Pisces? So Pisces then brings us to another interesting sort of perspective, right? When we look at that, we now see that we've got, obviously, it hasn't moved in here, has it? Share this instead. There we go. We look at the Pisces. What do we see? We see the crab coming out of the water, right? Notice when we're looking at this energy, the source of energy here. Now, is this supposed to be the sun or the moon? You know, it's supposed to be the moon, right? But can you see how the moon is asleep in the shadow of the sun? The implication that they're making here is rather interesting. You see the moon in the sun there. And so it shows us that it's part of a polarizing system and regulating the forces of the sun, the life force itself. We see the two dogs. The two dogs are sort of looking up. They're waiting for something. We see the two polarities, the poles in the future. Notice how the water in the distance is not calm. Really important to realize that. So we've got the calm water here, but in the distance, we've got a fairly stormy, wild sea with those two pillars. And these dogs seem to be like howling at it. And notice that the sparks of fire are falling from the sky. So there's a lot of powerful forces being expressed here in Pisces, which is the feminine pole of Jupiter. So Jupiter, even though it represents, in its pure form, the wheel of fortune, we can see that the angel and the demon are both represented as holding particular reflection within the sign of Sagittarius and of Pisces. And so even the beneficial good things in life that we can gain, even the boon, because this card represents boons in a reading, right? Represents your ability to generate and manifest good luck and to bring and attract abundance towards yourself on a material level, but not the specific material objects of abundance, but your personal ability to manifest and pull this towards yourself and the blessings necessary for this to come into being, right? As a process, which is what the wheel represents, is this process. So we can see how, this is sort of a fairly clear reflection of fairly challenging situations by the Pisces and fairly challenging situations by the Sagittarius, and both of them holding an important sort of point if you will, within this cosmic balance. And then we look at the fundaments of suffering, right? So suffering, when we actualize it, right? And I think we would all agree that this card on Tower Trump Tarot, I can't believe it. You know, when you ask for a Tower Trump these days, you get all sorts of nonsense. What is happening to Google AI? It's been very badly trained. So yeah, we get a sense of the Tower Trump, and I think that's quite an important one to look at. Here is where that loss comes into being, right? We're not speaking about the actual transformation of Scorpio, which we're going to get to. This is the loss necessary to turn the wheel. So Scorpio is the feminine pole of Mars, right? That's really important to understand that. Scorpio is the feminine pole of Mars, and the Emperor is the masculine pole of Mars, Aries. But this is Mars's pure form. So this is the process at the heart of driving the death card transformative potential experience. And you'll notice here, like what kind of symbolic story is being told here. The king is losing his crown. He's being struck. Can you see that this is an upside down sign of Scorpio, inverted sign of Scorpio, right? If you turn that around, that's a symbol for Scorpio, right? So they're showing us here that the scorpion tail is touching the crown. This is an unconscious ood at the suggestion with the Ouroboros. The Ouroboros, which represents the serpent around the waist of the magician, which is the point that we want to get to. So the magician is the perfected self that is able to wear this Scorpio, right, crown combination as an Ouroboros around because the Scorpio in ancient times, the Scorpio sign was related to the serpent, for those that don't know. So there's a powerful serpent relation. And the crown obviously relates to the spiritual enlightenment of the king, which is represented by Leo, which is, in terms of the cosmic cycle of the sun through the signs of the zodiac, represents the summer, the proverbial summer, the peak of summer, where the most abundance of light is possible for crops and for growing of plants, everything being a reflection of astrotheology. Notice how the tower is broken. Notice how you see these little tongues of fire falling from the sky. Do we recognize those tongues of fire from anywhere? Let's take a look. Where else do we see those tongues of fire? You see? Here we go. Tongues of fire. So here is the reason I'm showing you these particular symbols as they relate to each other. Is you see the same tongues of fire that's upsetting these dogs, right? Which represent different parts of our psyche, yeah? Which represents the ability to be able to look at things from multiple perspectives, I suppose, especially with regards to the emotional reality. Coming down here, and notice we see everybody falling down. The king, the queen, falling down from the tower, and the tower is being struck by the lightning bolt, which is Zeus. Once again, that's an ood to the wheel. It's a silent ood, but it's an ood, but it's operating through Scorpio, which is the feminine pole of this particular archetype. So let's look at the Emperor. And now here's another interesting perspective. When we look at the Emperor, you guys might be able to appreciate this too. This has become nothing but a pain in the butt. Butt pain. Welcome to the world of butt pain, ladies and gentlemen. So the Emperor. Now, what do we notice when we see the Emperor here? Right? Does he look like he's having fun? Look at the solemn expression on his face. Right? He's seated. Because he's seated, it means he's at a state of rest. So Mars, in its masculine expression, is at a state of rest. Where Mars in its unnatural rest, when it's in a state of motion, is represented by, of course, Scorpio is represented by the potential of movement, which is tied to this very fundamental idea. Let me show it up for you guys here. So this is Mars in a state of action, but Mars is in a state of action when it's in its feminine pole, Scorpio, right? This is Mars when it's in its expression of stability and rest. He's sitting he's on a throne. He's got the ram heads there. He's got his sphere here that represents the proverbial gold. He's got his ankh, the forces of life, in his right hand, and he's ruling, but he's basically trapped on that throne, right? He's stuck on that throne. He can't do what he wants to do. He is bound by external forces, and he has to enact. He has a role to play. And so there's a certain degree of selflessness, a certain degree of self-sacrifice represented here. That's why he's wearing the red cloak. His own passions he wears as a cloak on his throne. He's not able to act out his own feelings. He doesn't get the chance to, because he has to bear them. So there's forbearance being bound here in Aries, which is why Aries represents the head. And Scorpio, representing the genitalia, right, is about action. It's about being drawn into action by passion. So Mars is extremely passionate, and because Mars is so extremely passionate in energy, it finds its extension in the feminine pole. Now, notice we will see a very different dynamic when we look at temperance, right? This is the one pole of Jupiter, and we compare temperance to Pisces, right? Now you can notice here, as you see this particular dynamic with the suns falling from, there's a certain degree of action being bound here, right? But the action is bound. It's quite clearly bound, right? Here, the angel is sort of locked in, hovering. It's in a state of poise. And there's this potential being held between the two cups, but the actual angel is in a state of not moving. You can't move if you got this pouring between the two cups. So there's a shared relationship between Sagittarius and Aries, right? Here, that you can see. And Aries representing the masculine pole of Mars, and Temperance representing the masculine pole of Jupiter. Where the action is here, you can see the crabs climbing out of the water, and the dogs are literally barking. They're actually busy. Look at the water in the background. Look how everything's crazy. The sun, or the sparks of life, are literally being thrown out, and they're moving across the sky. And you can see that there's a green path that leads through the water. It's almost like a serpent snaking off into the distance. And the twin potential powers that represent the polarity that is bound by the principle of temperance, which is the polarity between the two cups. Here, the polarity is active, but the situation is at rest. Here, the situation is active, but the polarity is at rest. You see, there's two sets of things happening here. And so we get this very clear idea when we look at this action, the feminine pole of Scorpio, where he's moving on his horse, and he represents the coming tide of shadow, of that which is not. And this represents in many ideas, in many ways, it represents our fears of change. It's a card of powerful transformation. It's a card of powerful alchemy. This is alchemy being sort of put into being implemented. And here, when we look at this emperor, he's the one who is using the alchemy. He sits at rest, but the alchemy is working for him. He's at a total point of rest, but he doesn't have to do anything. Everybody else will do his bidding. All he has to do is want it, desire it, and it happens. So we can see how these polarities are all sort of shifting between each other. And we can see the fundamental idea that represents the basis for the suffering is then the tower, right? Which is Mars, which is the desire. So it is our desire for the things. And what is it that we desire? What is it that we desire? And that is the key. We desire what is bound by the wheel of fortune. We desire the comforts and the jewelry and the money and the accolades and everything that comes from the good luck of the wheel of fortune that brings with it the joy, the good food, the travel, the interesting, exciting information. All of that's represented here. So this wheel of fortune and this, the tower, are fundamentally locked into a polarizing relationship. So yeah, I haven't been looking at the comments, guys, because I've been like on these pictures. I hope you guys are all good. I hope you guys are getting it. Share this live. Crank on the thumbs up and the likes, and there's little like things on the side. Hit the little heart button, the little things where you got the little like whatever you call those little emoji things on the side. It helps to get more people to see the live. So here we've got like a fairly good representation, I think, metaphorically, of the suffering. And I think there's one more perspective that could be brought into understanding of what this represents, I think, in its most fundamental way. Another element, I think we want to look at Venus. I think we want to look, how does Venus relate to this? So let's look at that. So now we're going to look at that's not what we want. We want that. That's the one we want. So now we're going to look at Taurus, right? Now, notice with Venus what's going on here, and this is quite interesting. Here we have the Hierophant, which represents Taurus. And the Hierophant is holding his sacred special cross. He also, very similar to the emperor, he has his people doing his bidding to make his action move out there. He's actually holding up a hand to stop action, right? He has his crosses running up and down the lapel of his clothing. And he's also crowned with an even more impressive crown than the emperor, which is in itself a little bit almost hilarious. And so we can see that this represents being sort of, I wouldn't say being stuck, but it can represent being stuck. It represents number 4 in the Enneagram. And Empress Tarot. Let's get the Empress on the stage as well. We don't want to miss her wonderful performance. So when we look at what Venus represents in its pure form, this is Venus moving in its pure form. And we can see the abundance, right? This is when the abundance has been achieved already. So you can see the relationship between the Empress and the relationship between the Wheel of Fortune. The Wheel of Fortune is the wheel that's going to turn, and it's the process that will bring towards you what is embodied here, right? And once that wheel has turned in your favor, you then have the money and the success, the material that is represented by Empress. So that involves you actually gaining, right? And good health, all the good things that you can actually hold is yours. And that is sort of almost exasperated in Taurus. And so Taurus and the Hierophant have this fundamental connection that basically is you sort of being bound by the forces of formulation. These formative forces that have made me who I am and structured me to be like a square have locked me in to this persona being what it is, the bull Apis that crawls across heaven, representing this fundamental process. And it's how the life force becomes crystallized within the body. It's how we become who we know we are. And so Taurus represents knowledge in a very deep and very profound way. Hence, Hierophant is the one. Notice the keys beneath here. If you see the keys, those are the keys that open the door that will take you to the High Priestess. So the Hierophant and the High Priestess are fundamentally connected, right? In a very, very special and very profound way. She represents the moon. So he holds the keys that can unlock your unconscious, that can take you deep into understanding the unconscious forces that will become expressed through this process, right? And the unconscious forces expressed through this process is what suffering represents. And it has to do with the most fundamental locking down of what she holds as Taurus is here. Now, the other side of Venus, as we know, right, is naturally Libra, right? So let's grab Libra on the screen. Come on, Libra, baby, let's roll. Ding, 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 ding. So there we have justice. We have the card that relates to Libra. And so here we're seeing that the justice is active, right? This person is actively holding the sword and weighing what is being weighed. That's a very interesting point. What is being weighed on these scales of Libras? And what is being weighed are which parts of me should I keep? Which parts of me should I allow to become crystallized in my persona, represented by these formative forces of conditioning. So the Hierophant represents the conditioning that we have taken on board, in a sense. And justice represents how to manipulate and handle and how to balance these forces of conditioning so that they can become an optimal expression of something positive within our lives. And the purpose for all of this is this abundance of life. And this also represents the joy of life. And here we're getting back to the point of that breath, that in-breath and the out-breath flowing of Venus, representing the joy, the experience of the flesh that's actually quite joyful and positive and healthy. So all of these forces are what lock us in, and this represents crossing the horizon. Now, I think that's really important for us to recognize, because obviously the crossing of the horizon is the key to Mars's power, right? Let's grab it. Go on. I can't not do it. You got to do it, baby. Is that the one? Yeah, it'll do. Go on. That'll do. No? Ooh, look at him go, baby. Go, baby. Go, baby. Go. Okay. I found a really fun one here. I found a really fun one here. So let's do it. Let's do it. I actually found that I had an image that really rocks here. So let's go to pictures. Let's go to Enneagram. I actually have made a special picture that holds all of it in place. You guys are going to love it. It's okay to love it. Don't worry. I won't mind if you love it. You can all love it together. So here we go. Here is the picture. Let's hope that it's big enough. I might want to remove the from the screen for a moment so that you guys can see it. There we go. So here we are. So here we can see the Enneagram. We can see 9, the activist. Now 9 is related to the center, because 9 is the completion of the cycle, which means that this is how octave is born, right? On a scale of 7, 6 is 9. I want you to understand this interesting concept here. So when we're dealing with a hexagram, right? 6 crosses the threshold to become 7. When we're dealing with an enneagram, 9 crosses the threshold to become 10. So 7 and 6 share a representative relationship in the way that 9 and 10 share a representative relationship, which you can say 9 and 1 share this representative relationship, but 1 as it's carrying the potential of the center, which is no number, which I know Kate is going to want to hear me calling the placenta, which it does relate to the placenta because that's from whence we've come. It does relate to that the proverbial underbelly of creation, the raw substance from whence the womb draws in order to produce life. So that passion, energy of that activist element of Mars, it wants to cross the event horizon. That's its purpose. And so when we look at its purpose represented here, and it's important to see that it's related to 4 and 5 in a very particular way here, right? So we can see 5 as being the center of the Saturn glyph, but notice that the Saturn glyph represents an enneagram. So Saturn is closely aligned with the enneagram. And at the heart of this enneagram, we have the number 5. And 5 represents Mercury, represents the 5. And notice here, when we look at this top left corner, which is here, is actually a 4. So the top blue that goes 4, 5, 6 is the proverbial tree of life, or the epicenter, the totem pole, right? That central vortex around which everything revolves. And in the enneagram, that central vortex represents the center, where there is no number. And as we know, Pluto has no number. Pluto lives in the center. That's why we say the Pluto, the plow toe. What causes the plow to go round and round and round? What's towing the plow? The proverbial center where the rest is, the rest of creation exists. But it's also the point of rest around which everything revolves. But from that point, all the rest comes into being. And so 9 needs to cross that event horizon, which is why Mars has this mystical relationship with Pluto, right? Why their colors and their vibrations are so closely linked as well. Pluto's vibrational field of energy is like kind of an off red color, as relation to Mars being the passion of desire and the blood, the red color that it represents. So that then gives us a little bit of an insight into why this particular force that we're looking at here, which represents Mars, is the way it is, right? Because this is what it takes to cross the event horizon. That's what the symbol is speaking. So this is a way for you to verify the enneagram, what those numbers represent, because it's all coded here within this superstructure of the arcanas. The major arcana carries the entire story for our internal being and how we are put together. And as above, so below. We are definitely modeled in the same vein, modeled according to the same fundamental pieces, puzzle pieces, and infrastructure as is the universe. So the universe outside of us and the universe inside of us are actually, we consider them as being separate universes, but they're actually the same universe. But the illusion of separation is our perception, and that perception that produces the illusion of separation is once again carefully managed here by justice, right? This is Venus in its active role. And the result of that management produces the Hierophant, the forces of conditioning that become the structure of our proverbial ego. Our persona is born out of this tension, produced, and is regulating. Notice how the hand being held up here represents an authority that will not be challenged, right? So our beings are then in the state of not challenged authority. And this then drives us towards the feminine pole of Mars, transformation, because we are stuck in that torus field, within the toric field crystallizing, turning our flesh into the solid bodies that we have. We are then forced to recognize the principle of transformation as cyclical nature of life, the death card, which is what we have to face as the feminine receptivity brought about by the principle of Mars, right? The principle of Mars, which is this tower. And this in turn is managed by the two fishes that are swimming in opposite directions, which is regulating the emotional responses to this process of our enjoyment or our active pursuing of this enjoyment. And that is in turn kept in check by Sagittarius, the temperance, tempering our emotions. And the temperance of our emotions are a simple expression that keeps us proverbially bound and attached to this wheel. And so we are attached to the wheel of life. So here is how attachment works, why attachment works the way it does. I mean, if you want to use the tarot to decode the psychology behind how this works, this is the fundamental structure of the psyche, you could say. And so here we've got like some of the forces and how they sort of attach us to suffering, and why suffering is so important, because it keeps bringing us back to this most fundamental principle. Scorpio, transformation. Without suffering, there cannot be any transformation. And it makes us think about the original symbolism related to Scorpio, which is the serpent. Also the eagle. So the eagle, the scorpion, the serpent, these are all ancient symbolic representations of the sign. And the serpent has to molt its skin, right? Has to drop its skin, molt its skin, and become vulnerable. So this is the act of becoming vulnerable, right? The king has lost his crown, and these two look pretty vulnerable, don't they? On their way down to like the cold hard earth. They were up there living it up in the penthouse suite, and now they're diving headfirst into the ground. And so this represents that sort of the finality of the transformative experience, which is that which suffering represents. And of course, then, the henchmen of suffering, that move as a result of the Jupiterian drawing us in. This is our ego and persona fixations, which we see in Taurus, and obviously is an expression of the abundance bound in the mistress, or the empress, if you will, which is where our heart's desire moves towards. Notice Venus and Mars having this very, very close relationship, right? So where did they put Mars? What have they done with my Mars? Mars? Did they take my Mars away? They took my Mars away. How dare they take my... Oh, there's Mars. So you notice Mars and Venus. What do we speak of? There's a marriage. There's a chemical marriage between Mars and Venus. So Mars represents the sacrifice, right? Now we're looking at very spiritual ideas of sacrifice, self-sacrifice, sacrifices for the gods in the ancient times. This is all related to the tower, all related to Mars. And that sacrifice is representing the suffering of time, and that acts as a pole that keeps the abundance and the comforts represented by Venus in its pure form as the Empress in a state of balance. And obviously, this balance, as I've said, is fundamentally crystallizing in this form of the Hierophant, where we become sort of almost stagnant. And that is kept in check by the principles of justice, which is us keeping track of our own stagnancy, keeping track of our own sort of crystallized patterns, paternity that has become something that we have taken on board. And so here we can see how these forces all contribute and hold this proverbial web of suffering, which is represented by, obviously, Mars, which is naturally, you would think that it's represented by Saturn, wouldn't you? You would almost want to think that it's represented by Saturn, right? But when you really look at this, right, you can see, obviously, 9 is the point of crossing the event horizon. And the crossing of the event horizon, that point of 9, that energy that represents moving into the proverbial unformed places, becomes the expression of 1. So the beginning and the ending, or what is completed and what is begun, are fundamentally expressions of the same potential. And so we can see 1 and 9 are the vertical boundary, right? The vertical boundaries. And the horizontal boundaries are 3 and 7. And notice everything adds up to 10. When you disregard the central pillar, right, which is bound 5, binding 4 and 6, which also adds up to 10. All the outer numbers add up to 10, right? And in its perfect form, we can see the 1 and the 9 becomes 10. Here we can see the 6 and the 4 becomes 10, right? The harmony and the knowledge together compounds to become 10. The optimism to optimize things, and that mystical inner journey being bound together becomes 10, right? That lunar potential of empathy and sensitivity to the unconscious, bridled by the achievements and the goal-oriented attitude of Saturn, number 8. The 2 and the 8 form that powerful polarity that binds it. And naturally, the Sun and Mars being expressions. Now, you might notice in a lot of grimoires, for those of you that enjoy grimoires, that you'll often find that there are these sort of spells or particular programs that you can do that very often relate Mars to a prominent place in Tiferet. I don't know if you've come across this, right, in that form of work. Also, you might notice that very often iron and steel is very fundamental. Gold is fundamental, but iron and steel is the substance of the will. So that's why you have to have a dagger made out of steel, iron, right? Represents the power of Mars, the will. So the will is also related to the gold. In terms of the gold being the sun, the king's will is infallible. You do not question the will of the king, because the king's will it's finite, it's fundamental, it's totally structured. And so this is where we get to sort of notice the sun and the moon don't play a role here, right? Just to give you a quick little idea of why the sun and the moon don't play a role. They represent a polarity, a very powerful and very important polarity, as they express each other in their natural states. Now, there is no positive and negative polarity of the sun or the moon. The sun carries the negative polarity of the moon, and the moon carries the negative polarity of the sun. So it's the same thing that carries both. The sun carries, here you can see the sun is its form of Leo, right? And that represents the strength, represents the structure, of the Ouroboros, the structure, and the power of that structure as it's represented here by a lion. And notice there's an element of, and this is quite interesting, there's an element of potential being expressed here, but once again, that potential is at rest. Well, at rest to the point where she's holding playing with it. So there's an action that's being committed, but the strength is being held, being bound, right? When we look at the moon represents a carriage, which is something that moves. Fundamentally, it's supposed to move, but that carriage is currently not moving, because you'll see that the two creatures that pull the carriage are lying down. So there's this paradoxical sense of which one's in action, which one's in movement. This is the one that should be moving, but it's not moving, right? This is the one that should be stationary, but she's playing with the lion. But this is the strength which is utilized. So when you put the strength of Leo, right, and you couple it to the potential of the chariot, then the chariot becomes the expression of movement. So you could think of the chariot as the tail that follows. You could think of the Leo as the head that leads. So the head of the Ouroboros is leading, and the tail. So the chariot then goes on a journey into Leo. It journeys into the sun, into the place of life force, in order to complete its cycle. And what cycle does it complete? This is where it gets rather interesting. It completes the cycle of Taurus. Taurus is the structure, the crystalline form. It's literally a tauric field. It's literally a torus, right? And this Taurus is then bound, and the chariot is moving in through the corridor of strength in order for this tauric field to be bound. So the strength and structure of the tauric field is the strength card, is the sun. However, the fluid ability for this Ouroboros to be able to hold its duality is represented here in the chariot card. It's the black and the white, the two creatures that pull this chariot. And you see the wings representing the two wings. This is a subtle and silent ode to the transformative potential of the caduceus. And obviously the caduceus is the one thing that we haven't really looked at here. I suppose, it's important to recognize as well what the moon is bound. So the moon in its pure form, in its most occult form, is the high priestess, right? Let me just get it for you. It doesn't hurt to just put it up there so you guys can see what I'm talking about. It might make it easier. So this is the power of the moon, right? And she is the gateway to the mysteries is bound by Venus, but she sits before the gateway to the mysteries. Before you can enter into the mysteries of Venus, the profound source of life that abundance comes from, one has to travel through the unconscious. And this traversing the unconscious is the expression of the lunar potential. And so this is why we have this the moon, bound in the waters of her lower half of her body. And she holds the scrolls of wisdom on her lap, and they are semi-concealed, meaning that there's an insight waiting to be found and discovered here. And when we look at the sun, right, so she is stationary So this is quite important to recognize. She's in a stationary point, right? And when we look at the card for the sun, we'll notice that the card for the sun relates to the inner child. And so this inner child, as an expression of the solar potential of that which will become the crowned king, is on that white horse, the white horse representing the power, representing the personal power of purity coming into extension through the natural expression of the pranic field, the life force coming into consciousness, coming into this experience of being. And there's a mobility expressed here. So this is that ability of permeation of prana and of life to permeate all things. The inner child is at the heart of the whole story. Now, this is what we are running away from. The sun is the very reason why Mars has to do this. And this is why there is this fundamental connection between the 9 and the 1 that becomes the 10 here. Now, there's another subtle ood to be looked at. Ooh, where are you going, my sweetheart? Careful, my darling. Took a flight at the little table next to me. Just went off at a skew angle, but he's okay. So the sun represents this potential power of this pranic life force as a number 1. But when we go through the eye of the needle, the proverbial eye of the needle, right? And this is once again for us to recognize how important this is. When 9 moves across the event horizon, which is the Pluto, no number, and carries that essence of Pluto back into manifestation, it comes out as a 10. Now, 10 is an adult 1, if you want to put it into contextual terms. Now, this adult 1, right? I mean, sorry, let me get the 1 here. This divine child becomes the adult when it crosses the horizon. So there's this maturity, and this is why we have the different phases of the kingship, right? We have the young king, and we have the wise older king, right? And then we have the young prince that is the king yet to be becoming, which is what we have, the divine child. So this is why we have 3 phases, right? We have the phase from 1 to 9, then we have the phase from 10 to 90, and then we have the phase from 100 to 900. And these 3 phases represent 3 numerical sort of octaves, if you will, or fields of potential that are being sort of brought into manifestation. And I didn't mean for this to be a tarot discussion, by the way. I hope you guys don't mind that I've turned this into a tarot. I can't help myself, man. Like, I just can't help myself. The symbols and the power of the tarot is just endlessly powerful. And you'll find all these generic people on YouTube and like this, smash the like, share this everywhere. The whole world needs to see this, because you're going to find all these generic people on YouTube and they're all talking the same mouth frat. Yeah, they read a book about the tarot and they can copy and tell you what the tarot card means. But to understand its relevance in the psyche and how they work as a system, that's fundamental. It's like the difference between reading a story about martial arts book and knowing that you've got to move your body like this and knowing that you've got to move your body like that, or being able to actually do it and perform the strike and generate the power necessary for the strike. Yeah, man. And Vince, the man child. The man child. Yeah, I like that. We are always children, us men. We never grow up. We are very often chasing ass, aren't we? Let me have a sip of water. As I'm talking so much, actually. I'm usually on with other people and I don't have to talk so damn much. Okay, so we're getting towards the yes, guys, the ass is gone when the world sees the truth. um, so where are we? Okay, we're at the sun. And just how this is an expression of 9 after crossing the event and before. So the relationship between 1 and 9 on the Enneagram becomes so relevant, and why they add up to 10. And this relates to the 10 phases of being, the 10 Sephirot, the 10th Sephirot being the conclusion that is a result of the interplay of the other 9 numbers. And they all add up to 10 within their composites. And it gets actually quite interesting if you go on. Let's do it. You can't do any harm here by just looking at this. Are you guys ready? One more time, ladies and gentlemen. So now we look at this Enneagram a little more closely, right? And we look at the Saturn square. And what do we see? We see 10, right? We see 3 and 7. We see 20. We see 6 and 4, we see 30, right? We see 8 and 2, we see 40, right? Isn't that interesting? So 40 is what we get to, the number 40. And 40 brings us back to the builder, brings us back to the knowledge, brings us back to the structure behind the way things are situated here. And we notice when we look at the sigil here, right? There are 4 points, if you can see it, right? So here are, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to go with like 8, 3, 8, 3, 4, and 9. Then on the other side, we've got 2, 7, 6, and 1, right? And so these become, 1, 6, 7, and 2, which is 9 plus 7, which is 16. Remember that. Then we go to 9. Let's just see that I got this right. I don't want to mislead you guys. So 9, 4, 3, and 8 becomes 9 plus 2 plus 7 plus plus 6. That's the number. So 2 plus 7, 9 plus 2 is 11, plus 7 is 18, plus 6 is 24. Then we can take the other right, which is 4 plus 3, which is 7, plus 8, which is 15, right? Plus 1, which is 16. So we got 16 running this side, and we got 24 running this side, right? And 16 is the number that relates to the dipoles of Saturn being brought into alignment. And that's running from 1 in a semicircle. If you look at the sigil here, you follow the sigil as a curve. So the number 16 and the number 24 are being brought out here. 24 is 6, 1 and 6 is 7. So the 7 and the 6 is really what we're looking at in a very occult sense of terms. The 6 representing the harmonic convergence of the upward pulling forces and the downward pulling forces, right? Of the Ida and the Pingala, or the Merkaba, if you will, the hexagram at the heart of the flower of life. And the 7 represents the 6 elements dancing around the center, the 7th one, right? So that 7 then becomes an expression of the inward journey. So the structure of Venus holds the forces in play that manifest this outer physical reality. And the seventh principle is what goes in towards the heart, in towards the occult field, the spiritual domain, if you will. So you can see there's quite a lot of powerful symbolisms locked within the secrets, locked within this little cube. Yeah, man, it's really, really hot here. I think I'm dehydrating a little bit. So yeah, we can see this relationship here. And this relationship is quite important because the 7 and the 6 together comprise the 13. And the 13 is the expression of knowledge, which brings us back to the number 4. So that number 4, and this will give you an insight as to why the Egyptians had so much focus on the number 4 and why the architecture in the building is where all the knowledge is encoded, because the number 4 represents the sacred union and is a reflection of the knowledge that is gained by traversing the universe through the Merkaba and gaining the insights on the inner planes through the transcendence of Venus, because Venus represents gateways. Venus is the gateway. The moon sits in front of the gateway, as we saw with the high priestess, but the actual the actual gateway is the empress. Nature is the gate. So when we start to see how these forces coalesce, we can see why the prana of the sun, right, as an external expression that is bound to Venus as the structuring point that holds the prana of one in place, and the element of the moon, which is the chariot, which is that mobile process that the high priestess represents, is the inner journey, if you will, that gives meaning to the knowledge of the sun's power and potential to manifest this physical universe. And so these two are the fundamental faces of yang and yin, if you really want to get right down to it, right? And it's really that simple. Where did they hide the sun? They hid the sun away from me. I had the sun right here. There it is. So the powers of, expressive energy, the expressive powerful potential, and that energy that goes inward. And you notice here we have the wings, represents the flight, right? And that takes us to the last key part of the story, right? And that's quite important, because now we're going to be looking at the last 3 factors. And that is naturally Mercury. Now, Mercury is the alchemist, right? That very nature that holds the principles of alchemy in place. These are the forces that we're working with as a magician. And notice how he's representing the forces of ascent, the forces of descent. He's got all 4 elements laid out in front of him. Those are all the 4 other planets that we've just mentioned, right? What have we mentioned? We've mentioned the sun. We've mentioned the moon. We've mentioned Jupiter. And we've mentioned Mars, right? Saturn is his altar. Now, traditionally, that's a table now, right? But traditionally, the table would have been an altar, and that altar would have been a double cube, would have been 2 sets of dice. So he would put those 4 elements on top of the altar of time. But that has been modernized to be a table. But yet you see the table. What you can't see, and it's being hinted at, is that table is a square table. And if you look at the height of the table and the width of the table and the length of the table is a empty cube. So there is the element of Saturn upon which everything rests as a subtle ood. And we see that subtle ood reflected once again when we look at the enneagram. Right at the heart of the enneagram, the point 5, which is the midpoint between the 5 and the 9, is Mercury. And we see it in the sigil beneath this, Saturn sigil. We see it in the Saturn square. 5 sits at the midpoint. 5 is the most fundamental agent of all of this alchemy. So the agent of alchemy is the magician. And this represents Mercury in its purest and most fundamental forms. And we can see he's wearing the passion, the robe of passion he wears. He's got the infinity of the sun above his head, and this moves him in the power of Saturn. He's got the purity underneath, that purity of that divine child that has been turned into an adult. Here we have an adult, a young adult. And he's carrying Mars's energy, as I've mentioned, the red, what do you call it, gown that covers his purity is his passion and his desire to move him forward. He's got the wand there as well, which is relating him to the powers of the emperor, expressing the power of Aries, right? He's got the serpent of Mars as Scorpio wrapped around his waist that binds the powers of the sun and the moon through its process of transformation, of which he is the representative. That binds the purity within him to the passion around him, the desire that moves him forward to manipulate those 4 elements in order to achieve the higher good. So Mercury thus becomes that proverbial agent of expression. And then we see the masculine pole of Mercury, right? And once again, we see this masculine pole as represented by the lovers. This is the duality and the polarity, the being able to appreciate and understand and experience the antithesis, that there's contradiction in all things, and that this contradiction in truth is where the power, the masculine power of Mars resides in the background. We can see it. There it is. That peak represents the Shivling, represents the power of Shiva, the power of consciousness to move through all boundaries and transitions. It's a silent ood to Venus as well, because that is a great big throbbing penis that will enter the vagina of Venus. Mars's great big throbbing penis is fundamentally connected to the vagina of Venus and will enter into that hidden gateway that Venus represents and pierce the veil of the moon with the sun overhead shining down to produce Venus's life in these trees, the tree of these 2 trees that represent the polarity of action that is passive and passivity that is active. And we've got this perfect union here within Gemini, and we can see that this is a passive representation of this potential of Mercury. And then we see the most fundamental, and this is why this card relates to Tahuti or to Hermes in a sense, and of course Virgo, in the same way that the lovers relate to Gemini, right? Because we're talking about Mercury here. We see the hermit, and the hermit is on this journey towards the inner light, and the inner light is what's represented by the child of the sun. And you can see there's an active movement here. He's carrying the light of the sun in his staff, and he's following the deeper light. So he's achieved some light that he's holding. He's holding in his left hand. It's passive. He doesn't need to use it. He seeks more. And He knows where the light is. He has found it, but he is at the same time as following the light, because he is on a journey. You can see that. He's also beckoning for those to find the light and come to the light. So this represents the dynamic expression of knowledge. So knowledge in its two forms, relating to polarity, relating to the magician's ability to navigate all fields of existence and to be able to put it all together like a great puzzle builder, is finding his feminine power here as an agent of movement. And that agent of movement once again fulfills the circle, right? Inner spiritual knowledge that we seek, which is what drives us through the transformations in life, right? To become touched by the spirit of the power, which completes the cycle, bringing us to Mars so that we can cross the threshold into the unknown. And this crossing the threshold of the unknown is the source of suffering. But the source of suffering is where this guy is going towards. And this is the light of life. So, you know, that gives us a little bit, I think, of an insight. Little bit of an insight. And sorry I haven't been with you guys in the chat. I'm like an engine, but it's like, you know, like a lawnmower, like now I'm going, like I'm off. Namaste, Rebecca. How are you doing? I hope you guys are well. Vince, understanding. Yes, absolutely. Standing beneath the higher self. Yeah. This word overstanding, I'm so overstanding. You can give me understanding over overstanding any day of the week. How's that? Because overstanding is an egoic representation that lacks humility. Understanding is a humble ability to learn. Understanding means that even though I have a grasp of this, I'm still open to learn more. Overstanding means I've learned all there is to learn, I know it all. There's a very heavy toxic ego element to that word. And the way it's used, you know, I see where people are coming from, but I've always felt like, you know, there's something missing there. Rebecca, I hope you're good. I hope you're thriving. Standing beneath the higher self, absolutely, Vincent. That is like 150,000 times. Hey, Gaz is the hermit. Yeah, man. Yeah, you got to be the hermit. Stick around here for a while longer and you'll find yourself. Ah, bless you, brother. I hope you guys are all been enjoying. I hope you guys have found my presentation tying together these trumps as the sort of the fundamental glue that glues experience and manifestation to suffering, and why suffering is so important, because everything is geared, and you can see it, it's expressed here. You know, these arcana core cards tell us a story of it quite clearly. And you know, when I look at this, I see this. To me, the Saturn square is telling the story of why we have to suffer, because we're going round and round this wheel. And the reason we're going round and round the wheel is because the wheel, right? We're strapped to the proverbial wheel. There's no escaping what we're on. And the wheel is what they call in India, they call it chakra. And it's all things are spinning. And so samsara relates to this changeable wheel of life, that you're on the wheel of life and you're being turned. 1 minute you're above the wheel, next minute you're beneath the wheel. You're being driven over by the wheel, next minute you're driving the wheel. And so these forces of polarity are constantly sort of at our beck and call. And we are constantly eating of the fruits thereof, whether we're consciously aware of it or whether we're not consciously aware of it. That is just how this little structure works. So there we go. That has been the Bush Whisperer flow. I better make sure that I have enough recording time on my StreamYard before I close down the stream. Yep, I got enough time. I like it when I got enough time. So I'm going to send you guys so much love. I see this has been 2 hours and 19 minutes. Didn't intend for it to be that long, but it was fun. All I can say is big love to everybody. I hope you guys keep the smile alive, because smiling is what makes life worthwhile. Yeah, Rebecca, the phoenix, the phoenix is really the representation of this of Mars crossing the event horizon. So the phoenix is related to the serpent, is related to the scorpion, is related to the eagle. And it is this principle of, being transformed, going into losing your current of life in order to rediscover the current of life more powerfully than before. And so it's powerfully associated with Scorpio and that Mars fire at the heart of the water. So the phoenix is almost like a fire that gets put out by the water, and then, but it cannot be quenched. It regains its potency. It regains its intense. It regains its heat, and once again is reborn from its own ashes. So yeah, I'm gonna love you and leave you all. I pray that you got what you came for, that you enjoyed the ramblings, and that for those of you that are inspired by the tarot, there are endless depths within the tarot to dive into. How this structure of this relationship between these archetypes are fundamentally at the core of our personal foundations of being, and represent the fundamental foundations of being upon which the physical universe, as we know it, rests, and the various different modulations between this inner and outer universe that we draw distinction between, that we create this polarity of, which I think is fundamentally the reasons behind why we have to suffer at the heart of it, right? Because of this dichotomy. And because of this dichotomy, it has to be resolved. And the process of resolving the dichotomy is a cyclic one. And the cyclic revolutions represent the revolutions of Pluto, right? As the numerations dance around the no number of Pluto, we end up with this dynamic shift of potential, and it brings into life its new potential with every cycle. So big love, big blessings, sending you all peace, honor, respect. Om Shanti, take it easy. It's been great here. I always love your energy, even if I'm not seeing your words all the time on the screen. I was enjoying them earlier. Even if I'm not seeing all your words in the screen, I feel the presence of your energy on my heart, and I can feel the scintillating chatter in the background. What I sometimes do, that I've been doing more later than I used to, is to actually go through the comments retrospectively and take a look at what you guys are saying. It's actually quite interesting, because somehow I notice there's this telepathic connection where what you're saying sort of comes out later on, even if I haven't seen the comments. It's like there's this turning wheel. We're strapped to a wheel that sort of connects us all. So with that, big love, peace, honor, respect. Keep it real, keep it sweet, keep the smile alive, and keep yourself moving in the direction of joy. Om Shanti.